Oh, I think we're live.
Welcome to the Anarchist News Review from Freedom Press, freedompress.org.uk, freedomnews.org.uk. I'm Freedom Editor Uri Gordon, tonight with Simon from Freedom Press. Good evening. And our headlines tonight will be around the renewed Israeli assault on Gaza amid Netanyahu's far-right takeover of the ethnocracy in 48. We'll talk about the Tesla attacks that keep on going with Musk's rocket ship launch failures in the background, and in general, the history of the world reaching the absolute madness phase. And back in Britain, we're going to discuss Liz Kendall's welfare overall, the attempt to save £5 billion on the back of those made disqualified from personal independence payments, and the increased sort of and ubiquitous use of AI-powered facial recognition and other surveillance, an item that seems to have gone under the radar in recent days. If we have a little more time, we might talk about the situation in Syria, especially as it impacts Rojava and the Kurds. But we've got a lot going on tonight. I guess we better start with ongoings in Gaza. So, as people have heard, Israel renewed aerial assault on the Gaza Strip took close to 400 lives. It is estimated that around half or more of those were women and children. There has been the beginning of a land incursion that has partly blocked movement between the southern part of the Gaza Strip and the north. There are sort of two main roads, one going through the middle of the Gaza Strip, and that has been blocked, leaving only the coastal road. And the Israeli defense minister, Israel Katz, today, with a very sort of threatening piece of rhetoric, indicating that again there will be a push of population away from the fighting areas, and saying that unless Hamas leaves Gaza and unilaterally releases all Israeli hostages, then the alternative, said the Israeli defense minister, is absolute destruction and ruin. So this kind of militant rhetoric, of course, is coming just as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is further consolidating authoritarian power by firing the head of Shin Bet, as this head of Shin Bet is investigating his own office's relationship with Qatar, um, clearly intending to replace him with a loyalist who can also be deployed against the movement that is on the streets versus Netanyahu's government. So there have been also radical left demonstrations against the war in Gaza within Israel, within 48 Israel. Last night, there was massive repression in Jerusalem against hundreds of activists who came to demonstrate. They did not block roads or anything else, but the police dispersed them very violently. We have reports of a broken arm, tear gas, flash grenades, and so on. And the police sort of showing ultimate loyalty to the Judeo-Nazi minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, who has been reappointed today. This has been approved by the government and by the parliament. It was quoted in Haaretz that one policeman was not identified. He had his face covered, and someone asked them to identify themselves, and the answer was, "You want me to identify himself? You're 1,000 times on my dick. Ben-Gvir is back, and you're done for." And the police kind of very quickly adapting to that kind of a loyalist political police role, especially when it comes to those resisting the war. As we speak, there are thousands of Jewish Israelis flooding the streets of Jerusalem around the prime minister's office. They are not protesting against the renewed attacks as such, but against the firing of the head of Shin Bet. I mean, that kind of tells you all about Israel, where the struggle is between, yes, and a would-be autocrat and a sort of secret service with pretenses to defending democracy, while you have half the population in the territory held under military occupation. But nevertheless, it seems that the situation in Israel is coming to a head politically, especially with Netanyahu's intention to also fire the attorney general, and basically establish something between Erdogan and Putin style regime over Israeli Jews. Now, there have been just some calls for military refusal, this time emanating even from the Zionist anti-Netanyahu camp, but these are clearly too little, too late. Um, but it will be interesting to see whether, the stronger factions in the military, or some other kind of configuration actually leads to Netanyahu being deposed, which Israel, as I've said many times previously, is a laboratory for what happens, particularly in the U.S. And a lot of the things that have been anticipated in Israel have transpired in the U.S. It was also reported that Netanyahu at the government meeting today said, was characterizing the head of Shin Bet and the attorney general as conspiring against him, as leading a sort of extrajudicial coup against him. This is the same prime minister who did not quit after a police investigation was opened, after charges were put against him in court, and after his government literally failed to defend its own citizens against the Hamas attacks on October 7th, 2024. 3. Time is passing too fast. And so, Netanyahu was quoted as saying, what, Trump told me that he has a deep state. If over there it's a puddle, here it's an ocean. And that is the level of sort of paranoia, and real sort of detached, tyrant-like bunker mentality that Netanyahu is reached. I don't think he's just sort of reading anything scripted. I think that's kind of the planet that he's living on, along with Donald Trump. So that's the situation as far as we can update right now.
I mean, given how much time and effort Netanyahu has made to defang any method that might be used to actually bring him to justice for the things that he has already done, the level of paranoia is quite something. Like it's
I
sort
mean,
of
it's a rhetoric that you will find. I mean, I'm sure that Ferdinand Marcos and Nicolae Ceausescu were also like that, right? Because it's very
mm,
clear to him, I think, or in the back of his mind, that he has like 25% of the Jewish public support him. And in terms of like public opinion polls, it was very clear that it's about a quarter of I don't remember if it was the general public or the Jewish public, which is only 80%, but usually they only actually poll the Jewish public in many Israeli um, public opinion polls. So 25% of the public only were supporting renewing the warfare. 75% of the Jewish public support, elections, um, and setting up a national committee of inquiry as well. So as to why nobody came to the rescue on the day. So the government really does not have public support. It's not like you can say maybe Trump in the States has he won the popular vote. I mean, okay, from among those who came out to vote and so on, yeah. But it's like his ratings, his performance ratings are way above Netanyahu at this point. With all that's going on with the kind of very slow sort of emergence of grassroots dissent. We'll talk about that a bit more later. So yeah, I mean, I think we're talking about a kind of someone who is really showing the symptoms of a tyrant in his head. And I don't think, I think this is of the same cast as Putin, Erdogan, Orban, Trump, Milei. These are the same type of people.
I mean, do you think that I mean, obviously, there's been a lot of pressure from his right to resume the war regardless, and I mean, it's probably not correct to even call it a war at this point because one side has been maintaining a
No, well, to
ceasefire.
attack, I mean, to
It's
attack Gaza
just
again. No,
bombing at this stage. Um, but
yeah, I mean, it's yeah, yeah.
yeah, I mean, how much of it do you think is just Netanyahu trying to put off the day when inquiries restart and his corruption charges come to fruition and all the rest of it?
I mean, it is all of that, and at the same time, he is like for that reason enabling an agenda of ethnic cleansing and genocide in the Gaza Strip. I mean, that Israel is as a state is engaged in genocidal actions in Gaza as we speak, right? I mean, with cutting off all supplies and so on. So, I mean, from Netanyahu's personal point of view, this is probably, I have a blank check from Trump. I'm going to escalate things. I'm going to use the oldest hat trick, which is, starting hostilities, at which point my critics within the Zionist camp are expected to just jump to attention and this time it's not working so well. I mean, it's like so cynical this time that even that Pavlovian instinct is no longer as strong as it could be. But Netanyahu is, because he is so obsessed with his personal survival, functionally he is enabling this extreme messianic genocidal Judeo-Nazi far right to just have, without any reins, let out its, worst, most supremacist and awful side on this population of Gaza. And the Israeli Air Force pilots are the worst part of it, right? Because these are the people, the pilots are the people who nominally their sympathies are lying with the anti-Netanyahu camp. Right? These are people who represent sort of the declining, Ashkenazi, that is European descended elites, people from a kibbutz background, people from Tel Aviv, people from the sort of urban, educated middle classes. That's kind of who ends up in as pilots, right? And there was, before the Hamas attacks, there was this sort of a few pilots were like signing letters that, oh yeah, we're going to refuse the voluntary extra reserve duty days that we do. We're not going to do those, right? That was the extent of their threat. And of course,
Heroes.
when the war started, when the bombing of Gaza started, they just went, right? Just like, I mean, these 400 people in Gaza now were killed by, it's like 5, 6, 12 pilots. I don't know how many, right? So it really like, and now there's been some sort of, one or two sort of more open voices for refusal from the left, but the most left, but still not explicitly anti-Zionist margins of the anti-Netanyahu camp. This is too little, too late, right? I mean, it's very hard to have expected, them to do that after the trauma of the Hamas attacks, but nevertheless, I mean, at this point, the only thing that can actually move something will be a general strike of the public sector, or a general strike called by the mainstream unions. They have done that before over pay, over other things, like a general strike. When I'm talking about a general strike in Israel, this is not the anarcho-syndicalist general strike where people take over the factories. Yeah, this is like it's the way that there was now a general strike in Rojava to commemorate across the Kurdish countries to commemorate the day of imprisonment of Öcalan. So people don't go to work, but that creates a situation in which something can happen on the streets. And yeah, and that's supposed to move some kind of political thing in the state apparatus. It's very hard to know. I mean, there is certainly no hope for, the US or Europe or whoever to just step in and do that, and impose something from above. That's not going to happen. And whether this, you know um entirely captured a settler colonial public will be able to at least sort of, mobilize against the sham of democracy being destroyed. That just remains to be seen. But it's absolutely tragic for the Gazans. It's absolutely tragic. I mean, this is just. I mean, it's, you're just left speechless by the fact that, for 2 weeks Israel has been stopping aid convoys into Gaza, and nobody is doing anything. I mean, I even haven't heard the United Nations on this. Maybe I've missed something, but it's like,
I think
this is when it becomes an actual genocide. This,
NGOs have
this
been
is when
complaining,
people
but
start
it's
dying in the tens of thousands. The bombings will have been just the beginning compared to the levels of death and disease and absolute horror that I'm very, very afraid that we're about to start seeing in Gaza
well,
if
this is
if
the
nothing
thing.
shifts.
It's sort of even the number of deaths from the bombings alone um, are sort of heading towards was it 50,000 something like that
No, we're talking about, well, I mean, we're talking,
officially,
yeah, I mean, there's
but
gonna be, yeah,
but the number of
they've
unofficial
now
deaths
managed to recover a lot of more bodies, but yeah.
and but none of that even touches on what starvation will do or as you say what
Starvation,
sickness will do.
sanitational diseases, exactly.
Um, yeah, no, I mean in terms of an indictment of the international rule of law as was supposedly a thing. It's just it's incredible that so many. But I and I'm a cynical guy about politicians, but the fact that there have been so few who have broken ranks even just to say I feel ashamed to be part of this
Well,
has
in the
been
global
just
north, at least, yeah.
yeah. Just yeah, like worldwide. I mean, I'm not even talking about the people who are part of a committed system towards doing it, right? They at least have the excuse of uh, I face significant, serious issue consequences for my life and possibly health and whatever. But the rest of the world, you're just looking at all these politicians who the worst they get is a stern talking to from Keir Bloody Starmer, for example. And it's just none of them even saying anything vague remotely useful.
Yeah, I mean, even Bernie Sanders is now, all out. Like, there you would like, I guess, I don't know, it's not that I'm expecting, Jeremy Corbyn to come back out of retirement for this, but that's not where it's going to come from. None of our help, nobody is coming to help us from on top. That's what we always have to keep reminding ourselves. And I
It remains
guess,
certainly in Britain, the only people who have managed to make any significant impact are the ones doing the direct actions. Good or
yeah,
real.
I mean, this has been, again, I think that, the root of sort of just dispersed action, that is not going to be, um, directing a message towards those on top, is the only one that is going to be in line with our values. I mean, I think, like, maybe we should do this as a segue into the next topic, which is, yet another attack on a Tesla dealership. This time in Las Vegas, we had two vehicles destroyed. Poor Elon Musk. He was going to have a little bit less money to take with him to Mars in the kitty.
He's been
Um,
complaining vociferously on X,
yeah, I
saying
mean, the thing is,
can't understand it. Can't understand why people would be doing this. It must be the deep state.
yeah, no, they
Like,
brought
I
him out on
don't know,
Fox
you know,
News
I
to
don't
cry
know.
about it, and he said, yeah, well, people don't like it when you take their fraudulent money away from them. So apparently those who, burn Tesla dealerships are state workers, disgruntled federal employees should be prime suspects for burning the Tesla. I mean, look, the thing is, right? The FBI has a domestic terrorism definition, which is about, well, any crime essentially that is intended to intimidate the public or influence, federal or state agencies through kind of intimidation. Donald Trump declared today, he's expecting this to be treated as domestic terrorism, a category that doesn't exist in law, by the way. It's sort of an FBI operational category. I mean, there is a legal definition of it, but we could talk about the kind of different sort of treatment that right wing domestic terrorism and left wing domestic terrorism are given in various countries. But we've done that before, and I think the more interesting point is that this doesn't actually fit the definition of terrorism because the attempt is not to intimidate anyone. The attempt is not even, as far as I can understand at least, to influence government or to impact its decisions. It seems to be just an attempt to cause economic damage to the richest man in the world. I mean, that's whose pockets these actions are intended against. And it baffles me that people kind of seem to be looking for some kind of a big insurrectionary network of connected people behind this that are
They always
that are
do. I
somehow
mean,
connected, that are somehow all kind of have like employees in the Pentagon and in Washington that are on their side and gonna spring this deep state trap,
it's
the anarchists in the deep state.
it's a thing which it's really a derivation of an older trope, right? So it's always the case that if there is an uprising, the first thing that any given dictator who's on the ropes will say is, "This is foreign influence. This is people coming in from the outside." You know, most famously in Egypt, probably when the uprising happened there,
Mm.
the regime was saying immediately, "Oh, you know, none of these people are from
It's all a
Cairo.
CIA coup. It's
It's all
Israel.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah." And it's designed to do several things. It justifies a more violent response. It justifies Secret Service getting involved. It justifies shutting them out of the media, and it justifies uh, a more generally it delegitimizes the protest from the get-go, right, or whatever it is
It
from the
helps
get.
to create a more repressive atmosphere in general, right?
Yeah. Um, And with this, it's a very similar kind of playbook, I think, that they're using. They the cleverer among them will know perfectly well. I mean, sure, Musk knows perfectly well. He's much as he acts like an idiot a lot of the time, he's not a complete fool. I don't think his paranoia extends to thinking that there's a secret state cabal run by some
No,
high
I
up at
was
the
I was
FBI, but
joking, of course.
but that's the thing he characterizes it as, right? Like that's a deliberate
Mm,
strategy on his part. And it'll a lot of the strategies that they're going to bring out will be familiar to anyone who is involved in Earth First, for example. There's going to be almost certainly honey traps popping up all over the place in the next wee while.
mm,
There will be people trying to infiltrate cells or find cells to infiltrate. If there are any American comrades watching, if anyone shows up who is keen, competent, and has surprisingly shiny boots, keep an eye out for them. They probably
well,
are on a
ask to see
level.
pictures of their family. Ask
Yeah,
to
yeah,
see
yeah.
pictures of their family. That's the first thing, right? You want to see a good
And don't let them rope you
family WhatsApp
into
group
anything.
with pictures with their parents and grandparents, and then you know what's going on. But yeah, I mean, in general, I mean, but that's the thing, right? A lot of these actions are I don't think any of the American actions are coming from existing conscious anarchist groups.
No,
I
no.
think these are more of these kind of individual, non-lethal, unaccountable, but Luigi Mangione style actions. Because let's face it, it's not as if in the US there is the kind of anarchist network or community social base from which you can expect this kind of attack to emerge, right? This is not Rojava, and it's not northern Chile. So it's these individuals, right? It's these lone wolf actions, but they are adopting, consciously or unconsciously, with or without checking the Freedom website, they're adopting a sort of an anarchist approach to things. And these are non-lethal, economic damage causing actions, which have are not, they're not going to be accountable, but there is no sort of organization behind it. I think that's, and that's
I
always going
think
to be the
there's
elusiveness of it
a
and the strength of it.
there's a very interesting phenomenon. So we're talking about accountability with direct actions, right? So our conception of accountability with direct actions hinges a lot on, well, do you have the support, tacit or overt, of the group of the section of society that you're protecting, right? So if you're going after GM crops, for example, do you have a groundswell of public support which will be there for you in
Or at
theory,
least support among farmers, or at least
or
support
support among
among,
farmers,
the
etc.,
relevant
etc.
constituencies, yeah,
Yeah,
which they had.
which yeah, and there's an interesting phenomenon going on where not so much on places like Twitter and maybe not on Facebook, but I've been seeing it increasingly on places like Reddit, where there is a clear public supportive line that's going on for people who are taking on Tesla dealerships. And it's not entirely the usual suspects. So I would say that there is obviously the usual kind of uh, shoutier end of the left who are overjoyed to see this sort of thing happen and are saying so on places like Reddit. But there's also a less noisy but equally gleeful wing of what would be kind of the social democratic part of the Democratic Party. It's much broader, I think,
Mm,
than you might expect, the level of support. I'm not even sure that the right is tremendously upset by it because most of them don't like Elon Musk. Like
yeah.
there's a lot of weird terminally online tech pro fanboys of his, but quite a lot of the American right don't really like the guy. I
Yeah,
think
I
they're
mean,
probably
there's,
quite rightly.
in a way, you could say that, as anarchists we should be feeling vindicated, right? If there's any sort of silver lining to all of this, it's the unmasking of state and corporate power, for what, we've always been saying that it is, social democratic and social liberal, facades notwithstanding, you know and the sort of, brazen, uh we're ruling over you without even offering you anything attitude of current elites, that shows people increasingly that nobody else is going to come to their rescue except themselves, if they
I've,
organize
I've,
themselves
I
and
found
organize
it.
with each
I've,
other.
I found it interesting actually. There's do you know who? Do you know Adam Conover? He's like a
Tell me more.
he's a liberal podcaster. Got famous doing sort of mostly online, but then also had some TV stuff as a he very shows factually is one of the ones he runs. But he's basically a
Hmm.
comedian slash liberal commentator type. And
Okay.
the title of one of his recent oh, your face is gone. I don't know
No, I'm
why.
here. I'm here.
Okay. The title of one of his recent shows was quite literally "No one is coming to save us." And it's like, really? That's interesting that you would say that, given that you come from a essentially kind of a left, Democrat loyalist background in
Mm,
general. I think there's a lot of people who are in that. zone at the moment where they belatedly realized, oh God, this is 4 years in which the Democrats are not going to do anything. They have no ideas, they have no leverage. We have no other option but to think of ways which are extra parliamentary to resist what's going on. I think the lack of any
Yeah.
other option is actually quite a powerful thing. It's going to be quite a powerful thing.
Hmm. Well, let's look at our options a bit more close to home. What is going to happen? I mean, are we going to be experiencing with this kind of crackdown on PIP, sort of the same setup that accompanied austerity initially with I mean, I'm here still talking about the sort of the Cameron Osborne years where Job Center Plus became that kind of disciplinary environment that it was supposed to be. Is it an expansion of this, or is there going to be enough of a backlash to avoid labor shooting itself in the foot once again, which is probably its job description by now?
I don't know. So one of the things obviously that took place shortly after austerity began to be implemented were the riots, followed by the student protest movement. Um, and both of those things
We're talking
arguably were
about the
partially,
riots of 2011.
yeah, 2011 and then the
Yeah.
student movement 2012, 2013. And in both cases, there's a case to be made that it was the onrush, it was the both the acknowledgement that austerity was going to and was in the process of dealing a tremendous amount of damage, but also the understanding that things were only going to get worse. There was no light at the end of the tunnel. George Osborne was just saying, in the wake of the 2008 to 2010 crisis, we are going to continue to treat you worse and worse, and you're going to see your services decline and your prospects are going to decline. And Labour has essentially opened its opening gambit is basically the same, right? It's said, hey, you've had many years of Tory mismanagement and austerity and the decline of your living standards, and we're aiming for growth, but essentially our actions are more of the same. So you're going to have to, and in this case, 1.2 million people are being affected in one way or another by either withdrawal of or cuts to personal independence payments. It's going to affect primarily disabled people. And I think one of the most cynical things about it is that Labour clearly have looked at the lists of people who can fight back, and as with New Labour before them, have said disabled people find it difficult to fight back, which is physically true in some cases, but not in all. And obviously, there's disabled
And they're
people
not
against
by
cuts
themselves.
like that, and that's the key of it. Is that yeah, it's 1.2 million disabled people affected, but if you're talking about an average family size of what, four or six or whatever, you're talking about quite a large section of society who are going to have to either experience or watch their loved ones experience um, struggling, seriously struggling as a result of these kinds of policies. And that is the kind of motivator that can cause more mass action. My hope is that
Yeah, I
that
mean, I
mass
think
action
it's
won't just take the form of A to B marches, which have failed over and over again to actually achieve anything. But
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the point at which, anarchists or anyone really on the extra parliamentary left should be making a lot of efforts to reach out to any self-organized, disability rights groups, even if they're not entirely radical themselves, even if they're campaigning groups, and to see what kind of cooperation can be offered and what kind of work can be done together, because working with those most affected, they're actually likely to be very ready to have a more thorough anti-capitalist and anti-establishment critique at this point. So I feel like that would be a really important conclusion for us from this direction.
yeah, yeah.
Um, Well, I mean, so what's Labor's play? Is it basically, well, say thanks, we're protecting you. I mean, accept everything that we do, otherwise you'll all speaking Russian by next week?
Yeah, I mean the 5 billion that they're trying to save is suspiciously close to the amount that they're putting aside for future MOD spending. I don't think it's entirely a coincidence, probably, um, but it's also Labour is it's just caught itself in an unsolvable trap because it is unwilling to do the things which it would actually need to do to balance its books, even without the MOD issue. Um, the reality is that because it
It's
refuses,
not willing to go after unpaid taxes.
yeah, it's
That's
not
kind of
wants
number one, right?
it's not funding the kinds of investigations that would actually catch rich people who are dodging tax, and it's not prepared to up taxes on the very, very rich. Um, So it's not going to have the sort of money that it would need to do anything truly revolutionary, unless even reformist, unless it takes on vast debts. And taking on vast debt is something it is also not prepared to do because it's chasing the Daily Mail's approval.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
all it needs really is to focus on land and real estate, one, finance and investment, two, and the luxury sector, right? And there are, I mean, not that I'm pro taxation or pro state or a social democrat, but you would just think that there is such an obvious sort of populist way for them to be bringing in quite a bit of revenue. Seems to be either like this absolute fear of flight of capital, which cannot flee from the real estate and land part of it so easily, um, or just this sort of absolute lack of vision. I mean, someone told me the other day, Starmer is someone who was parachuted into a safe seat. He has no political wits, right? He's just not a person who has fought up, that greasy, dirty Machiavellian political path. Um, and he's just effectively become this sort of Pillsbury Puff sock puppet for whatever interests are actually managing the party line back there. And I think those interests, their essence is actually anti-Corbyn, right? That's how they built their power. That's how they came to dominate the Labour Party. That's all they got. We are not radical left. That's the trick of this one trick pony. It's simply the only thing they have, they know how to do, so that, like, social democratic parties, I mean, like, there's no anarchists old enough to say, oh, we were already there in 1919. But it's finally become this kind of a capstone experience where everything is on the table. No more masks.
yeah, I mean, yeah, it's worth noting, I think, that so I came of age around 1997, so I was just about aware of Tony Blair when he first came in, and Blairism had a lot in common in that sense. Blairism did have a vision for the economy, but it was fundamentally a neoliberal vision. It wanted Britain to be part of the global economy. It was invested in, Margaret Thatcher famously said Blair was her greatest achievement. It was invested in selling off or privatizing uh, the state's main methods of leveraging the economy. All of the utilities, all of the railways, et cetera, all of the airports, British Steel, vast sway, British telecoms, vast swathes of the economy that use. This is a thing which Aaron Bastani keeps banging on about via an interview he keeps doing with this dude who has been complaining that Britain no longer has control of its own assets as a nation, which is
Yeah,
true,
okay.
but is also has been
Not the
true for
word nation in
considerably,
Britain, but
yeah, but it's been true for considerably longer than is portrayed because Britain sold off as a nation, as a state, Britain sold off all of that stuff long ago to transnational corporations. Now, those transnational corporations were technically in Britain. So BT, for example, was in Britain and listed on the British Stock Exchange, but it's owned by a massive conglomeration of international financial interests, right?
of
Um,
course.
the idea that the Americans have only recently been buying out all of our wonderful industries and all the rest of it and turning us into a siphon for money, it's
Yeah,
not
no,
a
it's
new
not
problem.
about the Americans or the Chinese or anything else. I mean, all of these massive companies, which are mostly owned by other companies, and are ultimately owned by things like pension funds. Pension funds are some of the biggest investors in things that's actually our money. Okay, no one of our age is going to have a pension, but okay, the money, it's the boomers' money. But essentially, that is this kind of distributed pattern of ownership. What's interesting though is that Blair could still make the promise, oh, this will bring prosperity for all, we're going to make everything more efficient, it'll work better, deliver better value, the trains will run faster. Yeah, right. I mean, they just privatized it into a bunch of regional monopolies, of course. Now there is no such promise to be given either, right? Nobody pretends anymore
Mm.
that privatization, neoliberal agendas, cutting public spending is going to, in the end, deliver some kind of wealth or welfare or prosperity or even a livable future for anyone, right? They have nothing to promise.
And
They have
this it's
nothing to
actually,
promise because they are killing the world.
yeah, and it's the death of this idea is one of the core reasons why the far right is making so much headway. The fact that the left can't is partly because its own economic viewpoint, the kind of neo-Keynesianism or even not very neo-Keynesianism that it kind of tries to reheat every time it goes to the
The
polls,
statist left, yes.
yeah, is quite clearly not a functional solution either, because what we're experiencing is a crisis of capital in which the ruling class now has so many assets that the rest of us are being squeezed to death. Um, and yeah, of course, neoliberalism doesn't solve that, it just makes it worse. But Keynesianism without leverage, and that is the core of it, is that the state, the British state certainly, I think maybe the US state could, or China certainly could, but the British state doesn't have that sort of leverage as an economic
I mean,
actor.
I think isn't that
It could do
letting
better.
off labor a bit too easy? I mean,
It
especially
is.
when it comes to land and real estate. I mean, I think
It could
those
certainly do.
financial companies, they still need offices. They still need somebody to bloody
Yeah.
hoover them, like you and me.
It could certainly do a better job than it is doing now, don't get me wrong. But there is still a fundamental crisis of capital, and Keynesianism is not a solution to that crisis, as we know.
No, no,
This is
it isn't.
straightforward. Like Marx was banging on about this quite some time ago.
So was Proudhon.
So was Bruno. Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
this is fundamentally a crisis without solution, and the pretense that there is a solution, when it fails, as it inevitably must do, causes crisis. At this stage, it's causing crisis for neoliberalism, right? Because
Hmm.
neoliberalism has been the dominant paradigm for the last 20, 30 years,
Of
and
course.
it's the crisis is collapsing that paradigm. The attempted replacement paradigm of of a national hyper nationalist, xenophobic, protectionist new economics is also going to fail. But we just haven't seen it do so
That's
comprehensively.
right. No, I mean, everything is going to fail because we're going to be rolling back into, well, not exactly back, but we're going to be rolling forward into, 2.0 versions of mercantilism, feudalism, slave societies, and like in a way, if you want to take the sort of Marxian progression of modes of production, just to realize that instead of going teleologically into communism, it's sitting on a peak, and maybe that ends with humanity being the Borg looking back out from Mars on the Earth as a dead planet. I would think extinction is probably a better solution than that. Let's finally highlight an item from, well, I think our favorite publication for understanding, what is actually moving the ruling class in this country and elsewhere, namely the Financial Times. London expands CCTV network in tech race against crime, reports the Financial Times, and other councils also rushing to tool up with AI cameras as police grapple with a surge in street crime. This is how the Financial Times is framing this story by Joshua Gaber-Doyon, published recently, where it is basically showcasing a surveillance camera operator that has been contracted by Hammersmith and Fulham Council, and there's all of this kind of AI auto detection, facial recognition, technology that is, if you thought it was already saturating the public sphere, then we've been discovering that there is still a long way to go.
Yeah, I mean, in my view, I mean, I actually wrote about this a wee while ago, but the expansion of CCTV across Britain is fairly well known to be some of the most invasive anywhere in the world. There is hardly a high street you can walk down, including where I live, where you won't come across endless CCTV wherever you go. And increasingly, you'll see facial recognition either being tested in inverted commas or just having been rolled out across the country, where they will start filming anyone who walks into the centre of town, and if they happen to be um, on the police's radar for some kind of crime, they'll just be swept up. Um, Infamously, these um, facial recognition cameras are not particularly good at recognizing actual faces. I think something like 89% is the upper end of how they work, which means that 11% of everybody who gets picked up is actually uh, completely innocent. And also
Unconnected.
there is also a highly racialized element in which CCTV is very bad at recognizing black people's faces in general. Um, Nevertheless, the I think the use of the word AI here betrays a degree of buzzword, the latest greatest thing that we can.
Inflation, yes, yes.
Yeah, like showing off, councils showing off how safe they can make the streets to a certain cadre
Using
of
the latest
voters
AI.
using the latest AI. Yeah. I would be surprised if the AI CCTV is markedly different from the facial recognition software, which is in and of itself a form of AI or large language model.
Well, I mean, the
Um,
question is whether it learns, right? Whether it has some kind of component of machine learning. But in order to have that, then essentially it is becoming ubiquitous, right? To have some kind of learning loop within a lot of the newer softwares that are being rolled out. It is becoming something ubiquitous. But that represents a very significant sort of abdication of human agency. Not that I think human agency ought to be used for surveillance at all, but you're getting to this stage where you can see a horizon of that as an AI judge passing a sentence on someone,
I mean,
right?
so one of the
And we
things.
were already seeing the way in which, I mean, the Israeli Air Force, looping back to where we started, was using AI systems to sort of designate places as targets, um, with parameters that allowed for a 1 to 20 ratio of, let's say, identified Hamas activists to surrounding civilians. And once you allow a program to make those kinds of decisions, or even to own the parameters according to which those decisions are made, then that is monstrous, right? There is
Well,
something absolute. I mean, I think that is the definition of monstrous.
there's a so one of the things in this article which is pointed to is that the newer versions of these CCTV cameras will also attempt to identify aggressive voices. Um, so you can imagine that. Okay, so you get
If
your
someone
AI.
talking loudly on their phone because they're from a
Or just
minority who
someone
does
having an
that, right?
argument in the street. Perfectly legal. Perfectly legal to have an argument in the street. Um, but I could quite easily see AI picking out an argument, being attached to a loud hailer system, which, as we know, is a thing. CCTV is often attached to a tannoy or something, and I have drunkenly been pissing against a wall only to be told off by some disembodied voice of an evening. I don't
Oh,
do it.
really? Oh,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
I need that
Um,
experience in
that
my
was in
bucket list.
that was in 1999. I was a whippersnapper. Um, but yeah, but having the whole of that automated, the cops being called automated, and you then it doesn't take a huge step from that to the increasing. I mean, actually, this week, probably worth mentioning, I think it was Human Rights Watch uh, identified that essentially Britain's police, I know it was Netpol,
That was Netpol.
Netpol, I think via with HRW,
Yeah, they
identified
published a
that
report that
Britain
said, yeah,
is increasingly a repressive police state, essentially. And this is in
effectively, yeah.
part because the number of interventions, the level at which a police or criminal intervention is made, has got dropped so low that it is now just straightforward repression of free speech and repression of free association. And okay, so we now have a situation where Britain is entering a period of repression that can get as petty as it likes and then just automate it straightforwardly to AI CCTV cameras placed in every town centre in the country. It's terrifying. That level of power is terrifying. Um, and it makes me
I
feel
mean, I
that,
think
the infamous Blade Runners who cut down um, cameras, speed cameras in London because they don't like the not speed cameras, the low emission zone cameras.
mm,
Much as I think that's a bit of a waste of time, I think that the general process of these cameras can't be allowed to stand. And obviously, I'm not advocating cutting them down because that's illegal, but
no, no. I
these
mean, you
cameras
can fight
should.
against the right thing for the wrong reasons, and you can
I
fight
mean,
against the wrong thing for the right reasons.
there is probably a human rights defense angle to be taken there. I'm not a lawyer, so I couldn't possibly
Well,
say
I
where
wouldn't
things
hold my
can
breath
go, but
given what the High Court has said
oh, quite.
recently about that side of things. But if anything, this constant closure of the room for just everyday dissent, everyday rule breaking is will turn Britain. I mean, in the worst case scenario, it'll also turn Britain into a country of snitches, of people who are all too eager to participate. There's like when the cop in your head is not a cop standing over you, but you standing over someone else. I think that is would be the real sort of social injury, the real kind of ruin of the social fabric that could come out of this. The second effect is that the people who are gonna still be wanting to do something are just going to assume they're going to be on CCTV, and then they'll do the kind of actions where you either get caught or you don't. That is Tesla burnings. I mean, if like again, this kind of situation where the British state is shooting itself in the foot because it is over squeezing what any good Machiavellian would understand is a necessary breathing space, a necessary sort of shunt, even if it's about venting that, like they're not even giving us that minimal venting. I mean, I think they need to be worried about
Well,
that blowing up in their faces from a direction they can't even anticipate. Nor can we.
it's a fascinating thing to me that for most of my life, Britain has been held up by other countries as an example of clever policing.
Tolerance, human rights,
The
softly,
use of
softly. The police is
softly softly
unarmed. Yes,
to
yes.
avoid serious unrest. And for the most part, it's worked. You know, in my lifetime, there have been two serious social movements which have taken to the streets and caused uh, not even terribly serious issues most of the time, right? Like the students put through Tory headquarters windows, um, filled the streets out a fair number of times.
Yeah.
BLM was not terribly violent, certainly compared to the US. Uh, J18 and the um, 2000s protest movement was resolutely pretty peaceable.
Non-violent, party-oriented. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the biggest riots have mostly come from the far right rather than the left, the but in general, Britain has been. You compare it to France. See,
Or Italy,
France
or
is,
Greece,
or
or
yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
constantly on fire comparatively.
Well, I don't know.
I
Maybe,
don't.
maybe
I
they think the
genuinely
English
don't get
population has
how.
proven so good at repressing itself that they just don't expect. They
Yeah,
don't expect anything.
I
Like
think
it's.
they've gotten so used to such low levels of social revolt that they think that the levels that they are seeing now are worthy of repression, like JSO, like being up on the M25 gantry, like
Yeah.
it's nothing in terms of protest. It's a minor inconvenience, and it's not even the minor inconvenience of 10 years prior. But they panicked over it and they threw everything that they could find at it, and in, as you say, a quite probably self-defeating way. It's an astonishing thing to watch the ruling class lose its own sense of strategy, I suppose, in that way.
Maybe they're afraid. I don't know. Those who
I mean,
make
must be,
peaceful
yeah.
revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. Wasn't an anarchist who said that?
Great slogan, that.
On that optimistic note, let us close our broadcast for tonight. Thank you very much to Simon from Freedom Press.
Yep.
Thank you to our viewers for joining us. This has been the Anarchist News Review from Freedom Press, freedompress.org.uk, freedomnews.org.uk. Follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, on Blue Sky, best of all. Follow us on the website. We're not on X anymore. Coming soon, Freedom on the Moon.